And look at our beautifully refinished driver's side suspension and bushings. Everything on the front of this car will be brand new. Guys, all the cars that you see in these videos are for sale on my website, www.woodsandbarclay.com. Enjoy the video. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I think this is part 6 in the video series on the 1985 Cali Wagon. Now, in the last video, you saw me redo everything on the rear of the car. In this video, we're going to start on the front of the car. Now, this takes usually several videos to show the entire process because we're doing the bearings, brakes, engine mounts, suspension, steering linkage. We're doing all that on the front of this car. So this might span over 2 videos. And today, we'll go ahead and get started with disassembly, probably do some engine mounts and wheel bearings, and we might get a little bit further, but so that's the plan. Anyway, let's get started. Okay, since we're changing the engine mounts, part of that process is you have to lift the engine up a few inches. Now, in order to do that, we want to make sure we connect this, disconnect this throttle linkage that connects back into the firewall. Otherwise, you could bend it and damage it when you're lifting the engine. Okay, we really don't need to remove it. We're just going to see it's loose now, so it's not going to bind against the firewall when we lift up the engine. Now, up here on the front, we just want to disconnect our fan shroud. We're just going to pop out our clips here. Now, that makes it where this fan shroud, the fan doesn't bang into it and like try to crush it, because we're lifting this engine about 4 inches. Now, since this is the California model, the air filter housing is actually attached to the frame of the car. So that's not going to move when we lift the engine. So I'm just disconnecting my breather tube here. And then the intake pipe that goes, or flexible tube that goes onto the turbo, I'm going to disconnect that too, so the engine can lift and it's not going to pull on that. All right, let's go ahead and get the car up in the air and start work on this suspension. Okay, first thing we want to do is get these original brake calipers and rotors off, the dust shield and hub, all that's going to pull off. Now, I've already loosened the 19mm bolts on the back of the brake. What I want to do next is just remove our brake pad wear sensor, and that can just hang loosely. Let's go ahead and finish getting those 19mm brake bolts out. That brake is disconnected, and our brake pad wear sensor is just a small 10mm. Just disconnects. We'll take our little sensors out, and there we go. And we'll just hang our bolt back in there. Just leave that there hanging. So this brake is ready to come off now. Now this is an older rotor, so it has a little lip on it. So I'm gonna have to get a little pry bar to pry off that brake caliper. I'm going to have to force the pads over the lip, and we'll just use a little pry bar there. Oh, there we go. And we can just hang our caliper right there, because we're replacing the brake hose and the caliper, so it doesn't matter if it just hangs there for a minute. All right, let's go ahead and get the grease cap off. We're just going to take a little screwdriver right here. There we go. And there is our spindle nut. You see all the grease on there. That's holding this hub and rotor onto the steering spindle, or onto the spindle. So let's go ahead, we'll clean that up and remove this. All right, let's go ahead and wipe the grease off of here. And there's a little lock nut or locking bolt right here. So if we undo that, we can then spin off. There we go. That's our spindle nut. A little bit more. There we go. And get the spindle nut off. This is what holds your hub and wheel onto the car. So we'll take this off, set that aside. And now we can pull off our hub and rotor. There we go. All right, so there's our spindle. Here's our hub, outer bearing, which we're replacing, inner bearing and seal, and our rotor. Okay, what we're down to now is our brake dust shield. We're gonna break these loose. All right, there's our dust shield. Okay, this is the steering knuckle. Now, we're gonna clean all this up in the parts washer and refinish it. But behind the steering knuckle, you have your ball joint. So that's gotta come off to get the ball joint out. And then if you look here, you see your tie rod, your drag link, your steering stabilizer shock, and your tie rod over there. We're gonna go ahead and disconnect all this because everything under here is getting replaced. We'll take that off, and then we're gonna remove the spring here. We'll take our steering knuckle off, our upper control arm, and our control rod bushing back here. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, I'm just gonna demonstrate how to do one of these because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's like 6 little steering linkage ball joints we have to remove. Now, this is a 17 millimeter nut. We want to go ahead and remove that. Keep in mind, all this stuff is getting replaced. This is a ball joint separator. We stick that right under here, like this. Now, I always put a little spacer in here so it's not so sharp of an angle. But what this is going to do is going to pinch down, pinch that together and pop this out because this is a tapered fitting. So when this stud goes in here, it's tapered, and as you tighten it down, it wedges itself in there. And so we have to unwedge it, basically. Now, some people use a hammer, and they just hit this real hard with a hammer. I don't like that method. I like to use this ball joint separator. Oh, there we go. See how it just came loose? And it came out of our tapered fitting here. Okay, I need to go under the car and pop all of these other ones loose. There's ball joints on all of those. So I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I'm over here on the passenger side of the vehicle. You can see here's the passenger brake. Now, here we have the steering stabilizer shock, and that mounts to the frame here. And there's a 17 millimeter bolt and nut that goes through there. And we want to save that bolt and nut because we're going to use it on our new steering stabilizer shock. Just put a wrench on top of it there. And there we go. We can pop that out of there. And let's just tap that. There we go. And then we can pull our steering stabilizer shock out of there. Now, since we're reusing that, I like to put that nut and bolt back in the frame here so we don't lose it because we're going to reinstall that. Okay, we've got the steering linkage disassembled. Here's what we've accomplished so far. We've removed the hub, the rotor, dust shield, outer tie rod, idler or center link, or drag link, steering shock. There's another tie rod, dust shield, hub, and rotor. Let's see the condition of this shock here. Yeah, look at that. It's not doing anything. That's the original shock, that steering stabilizer shock. So all that's off the car. Now, that's only the beginning. We have a lot more to do. Here is actually everything we're doing on the front of the car. You can see there's our new tie rod ends because we're still going to use, we're going to clean up and refinish our tie rod sleeve here because there's nothing wrong with that. That's just a steel tube, but we can change the ends. There's our new shock, steering shock. See how firm this one is? That's what they should be like. There's our idler arm, upper control arms. Here's our shocks. I'll remove the cover from one so you can see the bump stop. There's our control rod bushings, new rotors, brake hoses, pads, new front calipers. There's the engine mounts, lower control arm bushings, ball joints, bearings. There's another one in here. So, you know, thousands of dollars worth of parts and labor right there. Guys, as you can see, there's a lot involved here. I mean, this is a 40-year-old car. So if this hasn't been done to the car, well, somebody's going to have to do it. A lot of people, you know, romanticize the idea of buying these cars on Bring a Trailer or Craigslist or whatnot. I have never seen one of these cars that all this has been replaced on. Never, not one time, other than my cars, because these cars are at the point in history where it is now time to do this. And these things are just starting. So if you buy one of these cars, you know, on Bring a Trailer or some other auction site, somebody's going to have to do this. This stuff doesn't last forever. So anyway, just wanted to point that out. Let's go ahead and get back to the video. Okay, we have the car lowered back down, and what we're going to do next is remove our spring from the car. Now we're going to do that so then we can disconnect the lower control arm, the control rod, get access to the control rod bushing, and remove our steering knuckle. Now to get this spring out, you need to have a spring compressor. Now this one is made by, let's see, Jadori or Klann, K-L-A-N-N. These were who made the tools originally for the Mercedes dealerships. And this one cost about $900. But you can get them, you know, on eBay for, shoot, I don't know, 150 bucks. But that's like, you know, just to use a couple of times. This is a extremely high quality professional one that I can use for years. But the way this works is you have a compressible rod here, and we have these pucks. Here's the pucks right here for the 123. And these pucks slip in to the spring, you know, like, let's see, like that. And this is, I'll just show you. But these little feet here on the bottom, when you stick them through here, you then twist it, and those feet grip right here, and that locks it in place, and we can compress the spring. So let me just show you how this works. All right, so there's our spring there. This one goes on the bottom. We're going to stick that puck in there, and this one goes up here at the top. Okay, I've lowered our tool down through the inner fender, and we can see it is now sticking through those pucks. So I need to get those little feet aligned with the bottom here, and then we're going to compress that tool, and it will compress the spring. All right, I have the tool installed, and I'm going to go up top and compress it. Watch what happens to the spring. All right, there we go. That spring is now no longer on the spring perch, and the tension has been removed. So now we can remove all this without the risk of that spring shooting out of the car. Keep in mind, guys, this is only the disassembly phase. We'll probably only get to wheel bearings and motor mounts today as far as reinstalling things, but right now we're just trying to get everything apart. So now we're going to undo our upper control arm, and that is a 17 millimeter. To break that loose, we're just going to put in our spring compressor. I'm sorry, our ball joint separator. Now keep in mind, our shock is still attached, so that's going to keep it from falling. There we go. That's now loose. Now over there on the other control arm, lower control arm, I have a jack stand. And when I lower the car into that jack stand, it's going to move this upper move this sway bar and push it up in the air, and that's going to allow us to then get a clearance here to pull out our steering knuckle. All right, so let me lower the lift a little bit. All right, there we go. See how it pushed out our ball joint stud there? And there we go. Now we can detach our steering knuckle. There we go. Okay, notice I've got a jack stand right there on the lower control arm, because the only thing holding that there now, that spring from just falling out, is the shock. But what we're going to do now is detach the shock, and I don't want that spring to fall on the ground and possibly, you know, uncompress and kill me. Okay, to get this shock out, you need to have a shaved down 17 millimeter, and you'll see there's two nuts there. They act as lock nuts. So we can get that shaved down wrench. All right, there we go. There's our top one. Now, if we're lucky, we're going to get the bottom one. We'll see. Yes! Sometimes those are seized on there and they're a bitch to get off. And then we can remove our shock hardware and bushing up here. But now that shock is free. Now we can get this spring out. And guys, I really, really hate this part, because that is a ton of potential energy stored in that spring. And yeah, that's just not fun. All right. There we go. There's our shock. And let's get this spring out now. Okay. Oh, I left my wrench attached. All right, let me go set this down in a safe place. All right, there is our spring, and I'll just keep it compressed and laying right there. Those are dangerous, guys. Be very careful when you're doing this. Okay, so what we have access to now is we can get out our spring perch, our lower control arm. Let's see, our control rod, or our guide rod, and our guide rod mount. We can also detach the shock right here and get our steering knuckle and ball joint off. We can separate all of this. And it gives me the opportunity to clean from where behind the where the spring was. I can clean that dirt out of there. All right, to get our old shock out, that's just a 10 millimeter. Get that on there. And we have all new hardware with our new shock, so we don't need to save any of this. All right, there we go. All right, next thing we're going to do is go ahead and remove our spring perch, because we need to get access to the guide rod mount front bushing, which is underneath it. And these are just 13 millimeter. All right, let's take that out of here. All right, and then underneath that, we can see there's our guide rod bushing mount. There's I think a 19 millimeter underneath it. We'll go ahead and take that off. There we go. Got that nut off. All right, next thing we want to do is undo our ball joint. Now, this is also a tapered fit, so we're going to have to press that out with a ball joint separator. Let me show you how that works. All right, here's our ball joint separator. I've showed this in several videos. It's actually a pitman arm, small pitman arm puller, part number 8149, made by OTC. That's just going to press down into the ball joint. That's going to go around the lower control arm. All right, there we go. That's on there. Now, you want to hold your steering knuckle, because it's going to fall when this ball joint comes out. There we go. And there is the steering knuckle removed. Now we can press out our ball joint. Okay, let's go ahead and get the lower control arm. And that's a bolt right through there. And then our guide rod mount out of here. And we'll be done disassembling down here. And then we'll move up here, disassemble our upper control arm, and then we get to clean up in here really well. Okay, sorry, off camera, I removed the front guide rod mount bushing, and what it is, it's two steel pucks. So that puck goes in right there, and there's a puck that goes on the bottom, and they're wrapped with this little rubber bushing. It's very rare. I've actually never seen one of these go bad. So you really don't ever have to replace these little rubber insulators here. And these pucks, these steel pucks, actually never go bad either. So we'll set this aside. Okay, the reason we removed that front guide rod bushing is because we want to separate this lower control arm from the guide rod right here. So that's why we took that out. So let's go ahead. I got my socket on here and a wrench. I think that's a 24. Let's go ahead and take out the bolt that holds our lower control arm in. There we go. All right, let's go ahead and take our bolt out for our lower control arm now. Take that out of here. All right, now that control arm is out of the car. There we go. Mission accomplished. And these bolts, guys, those are giant. You can reuse those. Look, it's still got the zinc plating on there. Okay, all we have left to do is remove the control rod bushing and then clean up in here. Oh yeah, we got to do the upper control arm too. I promise we're going to get to the engine mounts. Let's just get everything disassembled first. So we go around back here, and there we go. There's with that guide rod mount. There's three 13 millimeters, and then that comes out. All right, we're almost done with the last bolt on this guide rod mount. All right, there we go. And that just comes right out of there. Okay, here's where we are so far. Steering knuckle, hub, rotor, tie rod, lower control arm, guide rod mount, spring perch, and then there's the stuff we have removed from the other side. We still got to do all this again on the passenger side of the car. But now let's go ahead and get it lowered down and get that upper control arm out of there. Okay, for our upper control arm, see that nut right there? There it is. There's a bolt that runs through the inner fender, and we've got a 19 millimeter wrench on the other side. We need to get that nut off and then pull that bolt out, and that will detach our upper control arm. All right, it's kind of hard to record this, but we get a wrench down in here like that. There we go. All right, that upper control arm is connected to our sway bar. So before we can pull it out, we need to undo our sway bar, and that's a 17 millimeter. There we go. There we go. Now we can get that upper control arm out. There we go. Now let's get that upper control arm out of there. Oh, I can't wait to clean this up in here. I hate it when the undercarriage is dirty. All right, there is our upper control arm. Now, guys, we have removed every single bit of the suspension and steering from the driver's side of the vehicle. All we are seeing now is the actual body of the car. There are no more mechanical parts here, I guess with the exception of the sway bar, which runs through the engine compartment. There's no need to remove that. Now, before I move on to the engine mounts and then wheel bearings, I want to go ahead and clean up in here and make it look really nice again. That way it's pretty when we go to reinstall everything. First, I just want to get in here with a wire brush and start knocking off some of this heavier dirt up in here. And then we'll get some acetone and wipe it all down. And I've had some body color paint mixed up. We'll go back over it and make it look brand new again. So this will take me a while. I will be back shortly. Acetone works great for removing all this gunk. Okay, I've got everything cleaned up real nice, got all the dirt off. I refinished it with some body color paint, and that looks beautiful under there. Okay, everything is done and disassembled over here. just on the driver's side. There's our upper control arm. And now I want to go ahead and switch gears, and I want to start reassembly and rebuilding of the hub, bearings, and seals, and put on our new rotors. So let's get this to the parts washer. We'll start disassembly and cleanup. All right, after a little break, here we are the next day. And first we want to remove these old rotors from our hubs, because we're going to remove the rear seal and bearing, refinish the hubs. Now you need a really big impact for this. This is the Earthquake XT. You can get them at Harbor Freight. They're like 1,700 foot-pounds of torque. But it makes it easy to get these off of here. All right, so once you have all the bolts out, we need to separate the old rotor from the hub. Let's see. Yep, there we go. There is our hub, and we can throw away our old rotor. Now guys, hubs aren't bad. You don't throw away your hub. We want to clean this up, and we're going to remove this rear seal, take out our bearing, refinish it, and then pack new bearings and put in a new seal. Okay, we have our hub here in the vise, and we're going to use a seal puller to actually get in there and pull out our seal. But first, we need to go ahead and loosen the seal up a little bit. Otherwise, that seal puller won't get it out. So you put it in the vise firm, and then you got to take a chisel. And you want to go around the edge of the seal and just tap it in, because it's a press fit, and that'll loosen things up. All right, let's see what that gained us. Let's put in our seal puller. There we go. Now we've got our old seal out, and there is our old inner bearing. So we'll take that out. Now we will do that on the other side too, and then we want to go to the parts washer and clean out all of our old grease, because we're repacking new grease, and then we want to refinish the hub. All right, here we are at the parts washer. Now first, before I put all this grease down in my parts washer, I want to get most out with my finger. There we go. There's our old grease. Just wipe that off there. We want to get, there we go, there's a big old glob of it. We want to get all this stuff out and put fresh grease and everything. All right, there we go. And this solvent will just melt away any remaining grease in here. All right, beautiful. Let's take a look. We can see how nice and clean everything is down in there. And also, this lets me inspect the bearing race. This is the surface the bearing rides on. And I can see these are awesome condition, and there's no need whatsoever to replace the race. All right, let's go ahead and get the other one cleaned up. Then let's refinish these, repaint them back to the factory semi-gloss. All right, we're gonna go ahead and clean them off with acetone to get any residual parts washer fluid off of here. There we go. And then we'll get them nice and dry and take them out to my paint booth. Okay, here we have our refinished hubs. You can see they cleaned up beautifully. Back to the original factory semi-gloss. Now here's our outer bearings, our inner bearings, our seals, and these are our grease caps along with new, these are little copper pins that go into the end of the spindle, and I noticed they were missing. Mercedes had these installed from the factory. I think they are like radio interference pins or something like that. So I got some of these, and there's of course our new cap. So what we want to do now is pack the inner bearings with grease, and then put them in here, and then put our seals back on. So I'll go ahead and show you how to pack one bearing, and then I'll do the rest off camera. So you just get a glob of grease there, and you can use any good wheel bearing grease, guys. This is just Valvoline multi-purpose wheel bearing grease, high temperature red grease. You can use Timken, Valvoline, any of them will work fine. You don't have to go buy like Mercedes grease. That's ridiculous. Mercedes doesn't have a grease factory. Anyway, let's go ahead and get this packed. You just want to pack it up into the rollers. And you can see how it starts to squirt out of the rollers. You want to get it good and packed up in there. All right, that bearing is good and packed. Now, before we put it down in the hub, I want to get some grease, and we're going to just go right around our hub. Here we go. Put a nice coating all the way around there. All right, there we go. Now we got the bearing race I talked about earlier. The race is where the actual wheels of the bearing are, the bearings themselves. The race is what those ride on. They race around it. All right, we'll go ahead and drop our bearing in here. You can only put it in one way, guys. You can't put it in backwards. Okay, now we want to put in our seal. So we just put our seal right there. And let me show you the highly technical method for installing a seal. Here we go. There's our seal installer, just a 2x4. And we just want to put that right down here. We want to tap it in there. All right, there we go. And we can spin it around and check, and we see that is pressed in there evenly. All right, let's go ahead. Let me pack the rest of the bearings, put the seals in, and then we will reattach the hubs to our new rotors. Okay, I went ahead, packed the outer bearings, and went ahead and put our seal and inner bearing in the other hub. Now what we want to do, before we put on our outer bearings, is reattach the rotor. Now, you'll notice the rotor has two sets of holes, an outside hole and an inside hole, an outside hole and an inside hole. So the holes you want to attach to the hub are the holes in the middle. The outside holes are actually where you attach the wheels from the other side of the car. So we're going to line this up with the holes. Okay, there we go. And what you can see how all the holes line up. There's the outside, the inside, the outside, the inside. Now let's go ahead. We need to use blue Loctite on the bolts that reattach the rotor. On each bolt, we'll put some blue Loctite. And just get them started by hand. You don't want to cross thread anything. All right, now we'll run these down with the earthquake impact. We'll come back, we'll do it in a star pattern, and then we'll come back and we'll torque them individually. And then we'll just go around the outside with a bump. All right, guys, those are never coming off of there. All right, what we want to do next is flip it over, and we'll add a little grease onto our race here. We're going to put in our outer bearing. And then we're going to cover these and set them aside until it's time to reinstall on the car. All right, there are our nice refinished hubs with rotors. I'll put our little pin here. We'll temporarily put our caps right there. And these will get installed at a later point in the video. Okay, here are the suspension parts from the driver's side of the car. We have our lower control arm, and we want to remove this bushing, get the old bushing out there, press in the new bushings, refinish the control arm. Here is our steering knuckle. We want to press out the ball joint. And yeah, this one's a little loose. See, it's been in there for many years. So we're going to put in a nice new ball joint. Here is the tie rod. Now the sleeve is fine, so we're just going to unscrew our ends, our tie rod ends, and put in new ends. You can see these have been in there a while. There's definitely a lot of wear on those. And then we'll refinish this. And last, we have our guide rod with our guide rod bushing. We'll take this bushing out, throw it away, install a new bushing, and refinish this. We also want to clean up our original dust shield. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, here we have our steering knuckle and our vise, and we're going to knock out this old ball joint. Now, kind of a barbaric process, guys. This is how you do it. Stick our slug there, and we have to knock this guy out of here. There it goes. Couple more hits and it's going to come out. Oh, there we go. All right, here's our old ball joint. Now the boot was still intact, but you can see how loose it is. So we're going to go ahead and make everything new again. So let's go ahead and get out the bushings on the lower control arm. All right, we have our, this is another, that's from another car, guys. You can ignore that steering knuckle back here. But we have our lower control arm, and here's our bushing. Now the bushings have a aluminum sleeve that slides through the middle, and it's a retaining sleeve because it's beveled around the edges. Now we have to get that sleeve out. So the way you do this, you got to chisel the edges in, and then you can knock it out. Now on this car, we're actually going to install a heavier duty lower control arm bushing from a W126, which they work great in these cars, and it's just a much better bushing design. So it'll be a little of an upgrade. There it goes. And there's that retaining sleeve. See, we chiseled in the edges there because they were beveled, holding the bushing in there. Now we can get these bushings out. Okay, let me see if I can demonstrate removing the bushings. Here we have our Ingersoll Rand air hammer. These things are these things are pretty violent, but they will hammer out anything. Flip it over. Get it from the other side. There it goes. Now let's get the other one out. All right. There we go. There's our old bushing. And you can see we've already got a little deformity that has started down here on it. So we're going to put in some new ones, and this will be brand new again. Okay, next we have our outer tie rod. We want to go ahead, loosen it up here, and then we can spin this guy out of here and get our new tie rods installed. There we go. Spin this guy out of here. And that's what I love about West Coast cars, guys. See how easy that is to come out? Absolutely zero rust, comes right out of here. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and get our new tie rod end and screw it in here. And we'll of course clean and refinish the shaft later. But I don't want to get these mixed up because one's left-hand thread, one's right-hand thread. So let me go ahead. This one is the right-hand thread. Okay, now before I put these in, I like to just put a nice little coat of anti-seize. And that just makes it easy for the next guy that has to go in here and, you know, next decade. Put a little anti-seize on there. But that'll be a good starting point there. All right, put that in there. Now let's get the other side off, and this is undone with a 13 millimeter. All right, you don't have to take that off. Just loosen it up. All right, now we'll get our new one, and we'll apply a nice little coat of anti-seize. Here we go. And we'll run it down to, I don't know, it looks about 10 threads or so. We'll get it close for the alignment shot. All right, we'll put it something like that right there. Now we need to go clean up and refinish the shaft. But there we have our new tie rod ends. All right, the next piece we want to remove is our control rod bushing. I'm sorry, our guide rod mount. Oh, I always call it the wrong name. All right, let's go ahead and loosen this 13. Don't need to take it off, just loosen it. And let's see if we can spin this guy. Oh, look at that. I just love these West Coast cars. Look how easy that comes apart. All right, there was like, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 threads or so showing. So we'll screw back in our new one and leave about 8 threads showing. And this will also get cleaned up in the parts washer, and all that will get refinished. Put a little anti-seize on there. There you go, there's our nice new guide rod mount. And it was something like that. That'll get us pretty close, and we'll tighten that up later. All right, let's go ahead and get this cleaned up in the parts washer. Okay, we're just gonna clean up these parts real good and then refinish them in the semi-gloss black. Actually, the original paint still may be pretty damn good on here. We'll see. There we go, there's our tie rod, and we can see there's all where the paint's been removed over the years from people doing alignments on the car. That's where they grip it with vice grips and turn it. All right, we'll go ahead, get this refinished, and I want to see if I can preserve the original factory markings there. That's kind of cool. And over here too. All right, here is our lower control arm. Get this thing cleaned up real good. Oh, here is our steering knuckle. Here's our dust shield for the brakes. And here's our tie rod connecting arm that connects it to the steering knuckle. All right, we're over here at the shop press, and I have the steering knuckle in the press, and we have our ball joint down there. Now we're going to use this tool here. I'll show you the tool in a minute to press in our ball joint. There's our ball joint down there, and you see the little knurled teeth around there. So it's going to press that in as I operate the press here. You can watch it. All right, there we go. Okay, there we go. We have our ball joint pressed in, perfectly flush around the bottom. Now let's go refinish and repaint this steering knuckle. And here's that ball joint tool, that press tool I was using. See, it kind of curves around. The steering knuckle has a cutout. See if I can get you guys a part number here. It looks like it's Coleman Tools MBA 1036. Okay, here we are back over at the press, and we want to install our lower control arm bushings. Now, what we want to do is make sure, so see the bushing has a flat spot on it here and here. you want to make sure the flat spot is in line with the flat spot on, on your control arm. See how that works? Flat spot here, flat spot here. Make sure those are lined up like that. And now we just need to press this bushing in and then put the caps on. Now, before putting the bushing in, you want to coat it with silicone. Don't use grease or oil, use silicone, because silicone doesn't hurt rubber. And we're going to go ahead and push that in. First, I need to raise my lift up just a little bit. Okay, I actually just put a socket right here to, and rather than raising up my platform. And we're going to use some silicone spray and just make sure we squirt that down so it slips in there easy. And there we go. Let's just push that bushing down in there. All right, perfect. We have that perfectly centered in there. Now we want to go ahead and push on our cap. So to do that, we get the cap, centered on here pretty good. There we go. All right. Good. All right, now we'll seat this one on here. All right, guys, we have our bushings installed. And there we go. That's how you press them in. The 116 bushing, the 126 bushings. Okay, we are done putting in all the new bushings and ball joints. There's the 126 lower control arm bushings, a little beefier than the 123, so that's going to be a nice upgrade. Here are the new tie rod ends. There is our guide rod mount. Of course, you saw earlier the new hub bearings. There's our new greased bearings under there with the rotor. Refinished the dust shield. And we have our new ball joint installed. Everything's been freshly refinished. Look how nice it all came out. And this stuff is ready. Now, this is just the driver's side of the vehicle. So, I also have to do the passenger side. You guys will just see that side when it's all finished and put back together. So, what we want to do now is... Oh, I forgot to show, there's the control arm. That should also be included. There we go. That'll make it a complete set there. But what I want to show you now is, here we go, engine mount installation. Okay, under the car here, we can see there is the engine mount. Now, with no steering linkage, see there's no linkage here. So I can easily get my hands up here. Here's the other engine mount over here. So what we wanted to do first is undo the 10mm nut on the engine shock right here. And you also have another engine shock right here. We'll undo these 10mm nuts, and then we can lift the engine. And we're going to lift it about, we want to lift it. There's our mounting arm. See if I can show it from better back here. There we go. There's our mounting arm. It comes over and goes onto there. Now, before we can lift it, we need to go underneath here and undo that Allen bolt. There's one here and there's one right there. Those are holding the engine mounts to the frame. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, we'll start by getting this driver's side engine mount out. There we go. There's our bolt right there. All right, sometimes we can get this 10mm nut off the engine shock without holding the shock still. We'll see if we can. All right, no, it's spinning. So what I need to do is put some small vice grips on there to hold it still. All right, I'll just come up here like this. Stick a little set of vice grips on there. Tighten them down a little bit. There we go. We got that nut off. And we'll take our bushing, and this bushing is in great shape. No need to change this bushing out. All right, there we go. But there's a little flat on the shock shaft right down here. When I pushed it up, it exposed it. Sometimes you can get a wrench on there and hold it still. Right in here is an Allen bolt, and there's one right over on the other side. We need to get those loose. Here, this is what I was trying to explain earlier. See, I've got a small wrench, and there's a little flat spot on that shaft, and I got the wrench on there to hold it still. And actually, this wrench is a 9/32. I'm not sure what the metric is. I've just always used these. So I've got this side off, and I went ahead and got the engine mount out of the passenger side too. I got the bolt out that holds it to the frame. Now we can lift up the engine. Get that bushing out of there and get that bushing out. There we go. These bushings are excellent condition. No need to change those at all. All right, you see I have a telescoping jack here. Now we can lift this engine up. There we go. All right, there we go. That's the plate on top of the engine mount that keeps things from dripping on it. And it goes in that direction. Let's get this other one off. There we go. We got both of these off. I'll clean those up in the parts washer. All right, this part's a little tricky. Right in here is that Allen bolt. Now, I use a 1/4-inch drive, and I get it down in there. There we go. We can turn that loose. Let me get it seated in there. And now that's coming loose. Now we can probably spin it out by hand. So put that back in there. All right. And there is that little Allen. Now there's one on the other side of the engine mount. I need to get that one out too. All right, you guys can't really see here, but I have the socket around on the back side. And I'm actually getting that one off, and I'll show you the small extension that I used to make that happen. Okay, there we go. There's our other one. Now to get this one on the back side, I actually use a very small extension on the 1/4-inch socket, and that's how you get those out. Now this engine mount is loose. We can just slide it right out of here. There we go. Let's get this on the bench and compare it to the new one. Okay, here's the mount we just took out, and the rubber is swelling a little bit, and it started to get a little cracking right across here. Had a little bit of life left in it. It's not horrible. Still has the Mercedes sticker on there, so I'm sure they might have replaced these at some point along the lines. But here's our nice new engine mount. New old stock from the Classic Center. You can see there's no stress or crack marks, and the rubber is in much healthier condition. See how this one's kind of all squished together and puffed up from oil and stuff dripping on it. So let's go ahead and get our nice new engine mount installed. Okay, here's our new mount, and we're just going to slide this up over here. There we go. Got that in place. Now I need to put those little bolts back in here that I just took out to hold it to the frame. So I'm going to come back after I do that. I'll do that off camera. But you just put them back in just like we removed them a second ago. Now when you're putting these back in, once you get them over here, you can look through the bottom of the frame and you can see when they're lined up with the hole. Right there, and then you can get them started by hand. Okay, now we want to put the plate back up on top of the engine mount that protects it from oil and grease dripping on it. All right, I got that back in place. Okay, we're over here on the passenger side. I almost got the other bolt out that holds the engine mount to the frame. There we go. All right. Okay, here's our passenger side one. You can see how that one's pretty squished down compared to the new one we're putting in there. You can see how much taller the new one is. So anyway, we'll toss these and let's go get this back on the passenger side. Okay, I got both the mounts reinstalled. So now we're going to lower back down the engine onto the mounts and then put our bolts back in there. Now, when you lower it down, we want to make sure your shocks, see the engine shock? I want to make sure it's going through the hole there. If it hits the frame, it's going to stop it from going through the hole. So let me check on the other side over here. Yep, there we go. That one's going through the frame too, so good. So let's go ahead and finish lowering this down and get our bolts back in. All right, we got our brand new engine mounts in. See the driver's side and the passenger side. Those will be good for decades to come. Now we need to go back underneath here and get the mounting bolts back in there. See, there's where the mounting bolt goes. One on this side and one right there. Now I want to put a little anti-seize on them because those are mounting arms are aluminum. So you want to put a little anti-seize because these are steel bolts going into an aluminum housing. Can't do this one-handed, so I'm going to put the camera down. But let's go ahead and get those back in there. And let me just see if I can get this thing started. There we go. All right. And then you just got to feel it to make sure it gets in there threaded correctly. You want to do it by hand because you don't want to cross thread these. There we go. All right, we got that one started. Let me get the other side, then we'll torque these down. Okay, we just attached our bushings to the engine shock mounts. There we go. And guys, what those shocks do, when you're starting up the car, the engine, or when you're shutting down the car, the engine will kick. You know, it's a diesel engine. There's a lot of torque on the starter, and so the engine will kick. And those little shocks, they dampen that kick where it's not as bad. Okay, guys, that was 2 days of video footage compressed into however long this video is. So we got the engine mounts in, we got the wheel bearings and seals and hubs refinished. We got all the bushings pressed in, all the driver side finished. So that's going to be it for this video. In the next video, you're going to see reassembly of all the suspension and steering linkage along with the new brakes and hoses. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time.